Hey guys, today we're going to be learning about quadrilaterals, so let's get right to it.
Each of these shapes has four sides around the outside, as well as four angles in each of the corners. So that defines what a quadrilateral is. And let me write that word because that's a big word. Quadrilateral. So quadrilateral, once again, is a four-sided shape that also has four angles. So yeah, let's get started at classifying them. The first one we're going to look at is this shape, fairly common. Many of you know what this is. It is a square. It's a square because it has four equal sides. It has four equal angles. It so all of the equal angles is that they're all 90-degree angles. That's important to know because when you add up 90 plus 90 plus 90 plus 90, or 90 times 4, you get 360 degrees. Okay, and that's how many degrees are inside all of these internal angles. We'll get there. But a square is four equal sides, four equal angles. The other thing to know is that opposite sides are parallel. Okay, and what that means is this side and this side, if you continue them on in lines, those lines would never touch because those angles shoot straight up. And same with these ones. These sides would never touch either. So once again, opposite sides are parallel. One of the ways that we can notate, you'll see this sometimes on pictures. Let me get my scrap square real quick. When we say they have equal angles and they're all 90-degree angles, you'll see the little square in the corner of each of these. What that square corner means is that it denotes that the angle is 90 degrees. Often when you see an angle that is not 90 degrees, it'll just be a curve. But if it is 90 degrees, it will be a squared off corner inside. But when we're talking about equal sides, you may notice some dash marks like so, saying that those two are the same, so they look the same, so all of these are going to have the same dash mark. If it was a shape like a rectangle, which we'll talk about next, you'll notice that these two sides are the same, but these two sides are different, so those have a different notation on them. All right, let's get to a rectangle. All right, here we are. Our rectangle is once again a four-sided shape. 1, 2, 3, 4. It also has four angles. Makes it a quadrilateral, quad meaning four. What we notice here is that opposite sides are congruent or the same, and also opposite sides are parallel. Okay, so opposite sides are congruent, meaning this side and this side are congruent, and this side and this side are congruent. And I've sort of notated those differently. They also have four equal angles. One of the other ways to say this is opposite sides are congruent. You could also say, and a lot of people do say, that this has two pairs of congruent sides, meaning that that is a pair of congruent sides, that is a pair of congruent sides. The two pairs meaning that they have four sides. So once again, that's what classifies this rectangle as a quadrilateral. Opposite sides are congruent, or two pairs of congruent sides. Opposite sides are parallel, and once again, that means if they were continuing on forever, then they would not ever cross. And then four equal angles. And for those of you that were already jumping ahead, the four equal angles is, once again, rectangles have 90-degree angles. All right, let's move on to our next shape, which discusses parallel lines in a very interesting way. Our next shape is called a parallelogram. Okay, many shapes can be classified as a parallelogram, but this is one of the ones that this is the generic picture that we say pull out your parallelogram block, it looks like this. What we notice about this is it's kind of a lazy square. I like to call it a lazy square, but it has, like I said, just like a rectangle, two pairs of congruent sides. And the other way to say that is that opposite sides are congruent. Oops, opposite sides are congruent. And also what that means is opposite angles are congruent. And I'll talk about that in a second. And congruent, once again, means that they're the same. So when we're talking about this angle right there, it's not a 90-degree angle. And opposite angle of that is going to be this one. If we measured both of those angles, they would measure the same amount of degrees. And we notice that these two angles right here, I'll double mark them, those two angles would pair as another pair of congruent angles. You can notice they're less than 90 degrees on either side, and they're more acute. So opposite angles are congruent. And once again, it's a quadrilateral, so all of the angles together would add up to 360 degrees. Okay. So the thing that makes this a parallelogram is that opposite sides are parallel. So those sides, the sides here, are never going to touch. So opposite sides are parallel. Or it might say two pairs of parallel sides. Now, what does that mean? That if we look at two pairs of congruent sides, opposite sides are congruent, opposite angles are congruent, opposite sides are congruent, does that mean that a square could be a parallelogram? Well, does it have two pairs of congruent sides? Sure, they just happen to all be congruent, but are opposite sides, are opposite angles congruent? Are these two 90 degrees? Are these two 90 degrees? Yes. And are opposite sides parallel? For sure. So yes, a square is a very special type of parallelogram. And let's look at a rectangle. Is a rectangle a parallelogram? Once again, I do think it fits all the criteria, so a rectangle is also a parallelogram. And the most important thing here is that it only really talks about that that opposite sides are congruent. It doesn't have to be all the same, and the angles don't have to be the same. So a rectangle fits it even better than a square does. All of these fit the rectangle perfectly. Now let's talk about a very special type of parallelogram that is quite interesting. So here is a very special type of parallelogram, and I sort of fixed it this way because this is often the way you will see it. You might also see it like so, where this is a rhombus. A rhombus is a very specific type of parallelogram. So once again, a parallelogram had opposite sides are congruent, opposite angles are congruent, all sides or opposite sides are parallel. Now a rhombus is different, is that it is a, once again, we will just call it a parallelogram because we have those terms. So it's a parallelogram that has four congruent sides. So also like a square is also a rhombus. A rhombus, people sometimes call this a diamond, but this is a very specific type of diamond. It's a parallelogram that has 4 congruent sides. So this side is congruent to this side because they're opposite, but also this side and this side are congruent. If you measured them, they would measure to be the same. Take my word for that. So that is once again a rhombus, being all congruent sides, but it has not all angles have to be congruent. Okay, so really the only thing about a rhombus is that the opposite angles, like a parallelogram, have to be congruent, but all of them do not have to be congruent. So a square is a rhombus. If we look here, I'll just turn it like so, and you can see, yes, all sides are equal. It does kind of look like a diamond, but all sides are congruent and all angles are congruent in a square. So is a square both a parallelogram and a rhombus? Yes, it is. But yeah, so now we're going to get to our last shape, which has many forms, but I'll pull out the one that you guys have probably seen the most. This is what we call a trapezoid. Very fun name for a shape that looks like so. Trapezoid is a very simple quadrilateral. It is a 4-sided shape like a quadrilateral that also has 4 angles. Quadrilateral that has only one pair of parallel sides. So what does that mean? It means that only one of the pairs are parallel. So if you look here, that side and this side, the top and the bottom, are never going to touch. Okay, let me get this focused. Focus in, thank you. So those two sides will never touch if they never meet. But these sides, we can see that if I were to continue that line and continue this line, they would meet right there. So it only has one pair of parallel sides. So another version or another way that a trapezoid may look is often like either like this or like so. And you can see, well, also let's just do this. You can see that these two sides here are parallel, but these two sides, the bottom and the top, the slanted top, they would meet down over here. So it looks like kind of like a triangle that has the top, the tip part cut off, one of the tips. So once again, quadrilateral that has only one pair, so the pair being here, that are parallel. So I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, what if I just draw, do all 4-sided shapes have to go with those to fit into one of those categories? And the answer is no. I just drew a random quadrilateral. Let me draw another one that's, and I'll try my best to not draw the same shape twice. Try to draw straight lines. This one kind of is a curve, but anyway, they don't. The way we talk about quadrilaterals is that it can just be a 4-sided shape with 4 angles. It doesn't have to be a special one like a square, rectangle, rhombus, trapezoid, or parallelogram. Notice these sides, they are not parallel at all. They will eventually meet if I continue. Well, these ones are fairly kind of close, but let's just say if I kept going, they would. You see how they're getting closer and closer together. Same here is if I continued those, they would eventually meet far off into a space. Here they would meet somewhere down over here. So do quadrilaterals have to meet any of those criterias? They really don't. Once again, these are very special quadrilaterals that we wanted you guys to learn about. And you kind of see them all over. So I want to challenge you this week is when you are going around looking at your toys, looking at your house, looking around the neighborhood, whatever it is you're doing, try to find these shapes. You will find them a lot of places. I've been playing with some Legos, and I noticed some of these shapes that I didn't expect to see. They're right there in your Lego set. So anyway, this has been Quadrilaterals vocabulary.
All right, that's it for me today. And remember, you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take, so shoot your shot.